With the help of Hashem, we are learning Beitzah Daf Yutes. We're going to start on Daf Yutes, Amid Aleph, 2 lines from the top of the Amid. Before we begin with the intro, just to speak out that Yaakov was asking yesterday, why is it that sometimes we use the expression of hoyel, other times we have the concept of mitoich. Obviously, there must be something nuanced but different. So we were just suggesting that the word mitoich sounds more like an inyan pnimi, from the inside, versus hoyel sounds like an inyan makif. Or maybe in words of nigla, mitoich sounds like a siba, and hoyel sounds like a siman. Obviously that has to work out. Anyways, today we're going to start learning first of all about a potential prohibition of someone toiveling any kalim during the Bein Hashmashas period, as we'll explain why would it be such a prohibition. That will lead us into the concept of machshavtoi nikeres mitoich masov, that at least at times, or generally it's correct to say that a person's intentions is evident through one's actions. And we're going to start with the Mishnah Daf Yutes, the sugya that will go also into Daf Chaf, and that will be that until now we were learning about the dispensation of oichel nefesh, that one is allowed to violate what normally would be viewed as a malacha for food-related purposes. How do we apply this heter tzorech oichel nefesh when it comes to karbanos, which are being served, so to say, being offered kaviyachol to God Almighty? Now we're going to have here machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. And here again, we're going to have in the Gemara various versions to understand better exactly where are they arguing, concerning what karbanis are they arguing. And then we're going to have a karban oila, which is b'chlal not eaten by kohanim. We're going to have a karban shlamim, but we're going to have karbanoi shlamim that are connected to the yantiv versus nadarim and the davis, which will be the general term we will use to karbanis, to private karbanis, whether oila or shlamim, that a person either made a vow, Harei olai, it's upon me to bring a carbon, or a person designated an actual animal and said, this animal will be an oil, or this animal will be a shlamim. That's called a nedava, either on me or on the animal. The question is, l'shitas Beis Hillel, could they be brought on Yantiv? We're not speaking about Cholamoid, we're speaking about on Yantiv proper or not. And again, there's a different shlamim mezitin, but shlamim doesn't have to be brought today, it can be brought on any time. We're going to learn a clear machlokes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel as to whether smicha is done on a carbon on Yom Tif. There is an isur midrabanan to use an animal, to ride an animal on Shabbos and on Yom Tif. Smicha, which really means to lean with all of your might on the head of the animal, that is in violation of the general rabbinic decree. However, do we say, no, you have to do smicha. If the carbon is brought, smicha is going to be brought or not? That's also going to lead us to a very important machlokes that we will also have earlier on in Masechta Rosh Hashanah regarding the lav of Baal Ta'achar. When a person makes a neder or a nedava, even though it's ideal for the person to bring that carbon as soon as possible, question is, if a person does not, and the Torah says don't delay, loy sa'achar, Baal Ta'achar, when is a person violating that lav? It's certainly connected, according to most of the Tanoim, to the passage of 3 Yomim Tovim. Question is, do they have to pass Kisidron? So, for example, if a person makes a vow after Pesach, will he violate Baal Ta'achar, as we'll see, according to some opinions, only next year after Sukkot, not after the coming Sukkot? In other words, you need to have 3 Yomim Tovim pass Kiseder, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot for them the person to violate. There's going to be other Tanoim that hold when any 3 regalim pass, it doesn't matter to say that the person will be in violation. There's going to be a Tana that holds that Sukkot is the only Ki Yom Tov. When Sukkot passes, then you'll be violating. We will be learning the difference between a Shalmei Chagiga and a Shalmei Simcha. In other words, every day, every Yom Tov, every Yid not only has a mitzvah, every man has an obligation to appear in the Azara, but he has to come not empty-handed, but with an Oilas Re'iyah and with a Shalmei Chagiga. Aside of there being an obligation on the person to bring a shlamim connected to the Yom Tiv, there is something else called Shalmei Simcha. Now, Shalmei Simcha doesn't mean that I have to bring a carbon. Shalmei Simcha means that I must celebrate Simcha by eating meat of kachim. If I already have a carbon for any other reason, but I have meat of a carbon, I will be fulfilling Shalmei Simcha. I'm going to have Simcha through eating Psar kachim. Shalmei Chagiga means that I have to bring a carbon connected to this Chag. Why will that? This will be very negeya, because there is a rule that kol davar shebachayva einoi ba ela min hachulin. And therefore, as we will see, if a person, for example, has to bring a carbon toida, and they brought a carbon toida, so now they have meat. So as far as Shalmei Simcha is concerned, you fulfill your Shalmei Simcha by eating the carbon toida. You were anyways mechuyev to bring the carbon toida, so what? I'm having psar kachim. However, you can never use, at least as a rule, your carbon toida that anyways you were mechuyev to bring, so to say, double dipping, to also cover your obligation of Shalmei Chagiga. Perhaps if a person, when the person designates the toida, and they make a tanai, they make a stipulation, I am designating this toida bit tanai, that it should also cover my obligation of Shalmei Chagiga, whether that tanai will be effective or not. L'shitas Rashi or l'shitas Tosfos will very much depend on the order of how you worded that stipulation, and that will be the last sugya that we will learn today, that there are many things that theoretically could work, but you have to know how to be mesaded it. And Seder B'chlal in life is of utmost importance, as we'll apply it to our halacha over here, and many other dinim, many other topics. This is just a general outline. We are going to start on Daf Yutes Amud Aleph in the beginning of the second line from the top of the Amud. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shar kol nivdvarim. Says the Gemara, Tanu Rabbanan. We learned in a Beitzah. Kli shenitma me'erev Yom Tiv, as we are learning the sugya, keli that became tamei from before Yom Tiv, ein madbilin oisoi bein hashmashos. So we learned that there is an isur derabanan to toivel keli on Yom Tiv, and yesterday's daf we learned 4 different suggestions, 4 different approaches. Bein hashmashos, as Rashi reminds us, 19 lines from the top of the Amid. In English it's called twilight. Is halachically a zman, in between day and night. That's sofik yoim, sofik laila. A person should not say the isur of tefillas kelim is only midrabanan. I am at a time which still might be day. In other words, it's only a sofik if it's called Yom Tiv. Maybe sofik derabanan. Let's be lenient, which is what we say in most times. Not over here. Even already bein hashmashes, you may not toivel kelim. So says the Tanach. Upon which says Rabbi Shimon Shizuri, you're kidding me? Bein hashmashes, I agree with you. But I don't need for you to tell me that you can't toivel kelim, bein hashmashes going into Yom Tiv, because there is a general prohibition to toivel kelim during any bein hashmashes. Af b'choil ein madbilin oisoi. Wow. So there's no need to tell me your halach. Now, what would be the issue of toiveling a keli bein hashmashes? Who cares if it's twilight? Who cares if it's sofek yom, sofek laila? So that says Rab Shimon Shizuri, b'pnei shetzarich herev shemesh. There is a rule that when something is tamei today, both a person and a keli, even after the mikvah, there is a certain vestige of tumah on the person. Makes a lot of sense. Everything goes after the beginning. When a person begins the day on the right foot, let's speak in the positive, the whole day is better. You wake up in the morning and you begin to learn, especially if it's earlier, it's going to affect in a good way the whole day. But on the opposite, if the day begins betuma, even though you went to the mikvah, the fact that it began betuma, it has some sort of negative effect. Now, it's the vestige of Tumah doesn't affect all of the dinim. We're going to learn pratim in the 3rd Perek of Chagiga. For certain things we don't care, but for other things we do. What will completely remove the Tumah? Night, when the day has to completely end. And indeed, that's the beginning of the whole Shas in Mishnayos, in Torah Shebal Peh. Right, that me'emasai koren neshama ba'arvin b'shno shahakoyanim nechnasam lechel b'trumasam. That means if a kohen was tamei, even though they went to the mikvah, as far as truma is concerned, they have to wait until head of shemesh. And the same thing is with kelim. If you want to use this keli for truma, you want to make sure the keli is not mitame the truma, not only mikvah, wait until head of shemesh. Now, if a person is going to take their keli to the mikvah, bein hashmashas, Rab Shimon Shazuri is afraid, this person might think that they took the keli to the mikvah at day, and then when it's vaday laila, boom, you already have the head of shemesh. But we're not going to say that. Because since bein hashmashas might already be night, if you take an item to the mikvah already at night, head of shemesh means that after you took it to the mikvah, now you have to wait until nightfall, which means it's only going to become completely purified tomorrow night. The person l'chayda won't know that. They won't know that. So to prevent a person from using a keli that is still with some vestige of tumah, they made a takana, never take it bein hashmashas. Okay. Tzvika, you good? Good. So now, the Tanach, what he doesn't hold, that certain things need to have head of shemesh. L'chayda, I know, the fact that he has to say that you may not take it bein hashmashas only when it comes as a yontiv, mashma, that he allows you to take it to the mikveh by bein hashmashas. Why aren't we afraid that this person might use it right when it gets dark? So Amar Rava, I want you to know that Ash Kachtinu l'Rabbanan Devei Rav, when I found the yeshiva b'achrim of the Rav, the Yosviva Ka'amri, I asked them, what do you think? What's going on over here? What's underlying this machlokes? So they suggested that b'machshavtoi nekeres m'toich ma'asav kamiflagi, that the issue here is whether we halachically could say that a person's intentions is evident from his actions, meaning the case of the Beitzah is that he's holding a keli v'rohit v'ozl, and he's running bein hashmashas lad pula. He's running. Why is he running? So the Tanakama holds, again, that's the word of machshavtoi nikeres mitoich ma'asav, that high the korohit v'ozl, you know why he's running, is a raya that proves that meida yoda, that he knows the boy ahead of shemesh, and that's why he's trying to toivel it before bein hashmashas. He knows that. Now, he doesn't know that he missed the time. He toiveled it during bein hashmashas. But the moment he'll discover that he toiveled it by bein hashmashas, he's going to wait until tomorrow night. You see that this person knows that there's an issue of head of shemesh. He's trying to chaparain and do it before bein hashmashas. Once we notice that, let him toivel it whenever. And then he'll find out. And then if he'll find out that Hitaka already did it in bein hashmashas, he'll wait until the next day. Umar Sava, that's Rab Shimon Shazuri, machmas malach lehu dekoroit. Maybe he's running simply because he has work to do afterwards. This is not the last task of the day. Mela, the last task in the day, you're already chilling out. He doesn't know about the dinam of head of shemesh, which is why even when he's running, you do not allow him. This is what the Talmidim of the Veirav of the Yeshiva of Rav was suggesting to Rava to explain the machlokes, the first white line. However, no, Rava says, and I told them, no, I like what you're saying, but I'm gonna apply it as following. Everyone will agree that when a person is running, we say he knows that there is an issue of head of shemesh, and we allow him to toivel it. He's toiveling it bein hashmashas. When he'll find out that he did it bein hashmashas, and then he won't use it until tomorrow night. Ki pligi, the machlokes, the area of the machlokes is only going the itmi bepochos meka'adosha. Halacha is that the shmoyne shiratzim, that in part tuma, even if you only have a part of a sheretz, of any of those shmoyne shiratzim, and we know halacha l'moshe misinai, that even if a piece of a sheretz only has the size of a adasha, of a lentil, it still has the koyach to be mitame to one part to convey tuma. Less than the ha'adasha cannot be mitame. Here you have a person that has a keli that had contact with less of a adasha of a sheretz. Really, that item is not tummy. However, this person doesn't know that halacha. He has a question mark. For also, l'kamei d'Rabbanan, he came to the sages and l'shayule to ask, "Bepochus mikadasha itmi oiloi." So we see that this person is ignorant when it comes to some of the halachas of tum and tara. So Mar Savar, this goes at Rab Shimon Shazuri, that mida haloi gomer, head of Shamash Lami loy gomer. Even though he's running, normally we say, yeah, you're running, you got to do it before bein hashmashas. But there is a small possibility. You're running because you are in a rush. You're running because you have work to do. You're running because you want to do homework with your kids. What are you running for to do work? Okay, we normally wouldn't say it, but here that we see that this Yid doesn't know the dinim properly. If he doesn't know one din, maybe he doesn't know the other din. And in such a case is where Rab Shimon Shazuri says you may never toivel kelim during Bein Hashmashas. It is during that case that Omar Sova the Tanach holds that just because a person is not knowledgeable in one of the many dinim of Tumah and Tara, we do not say, if you don't know this, maybe you know nothing. No, what you don't know, you don't know. Hohed of Shemesh, we're going to continue to presume that you know about this important rule. And since you are running, so therefore we say, Machshavtei shel Adam nikeres miteich ma'asav, the running in itself indicates, it's not a proof, but it's an indication that he's trying to get it in before Bein Hashmashas. Once we see the person is attempting to do something prior to Bein Hashmashas, let that person do it whenever he does it. Because even if he does it already during Bein Hashmashas, when he'll find out, he won't use that keli for Truma until the next day. All right. And now we are referring to the end of the Mishnah Daf, on Daf Yud Zayin Amud Beis, where the Mishnah says that you are allowed to be toivel keli on Yom Tiv, migav legav. Migav legav means from one purpose to another purpose. Okay, there is an isur d'Rabbanan to toivel kelim on Yom Tiv. What's this exception? What does it mean? So Tanach Rabbanan ketzat migav legav. So the Beitzah explains the following: that haroitze lasois gitoy al gabe kadoy or kadoy al gabe gitoy. Gas means a wine press. Kad means an olive press. We're going to learn more details at the end of Chagiga. But you should know that when a person goes to the mikveh, not now, during the times of people's adherence to the dinim of Tumah and Tara properly, if I have in mind that I'm going to the mikveh because I want to eat Meiser Sheni, and now I say, you know what, let me eat Truma, I have to go to the mikveh again. Even though I went to the mikveh, I was mindful not to become tummy again, going to the mikveh, for one, doesn't allow you to be viewed as someone who's tired for something else that has a higher standard of tahara. Now, there are people, therefore, that applied this concept even when halachically they did not have to. So, for example, if I'm toiveling a keli because I want to use it in my wine press, and then I decide, you know what, I'm going to use this utensil in my olive press. Here, al pidin, you don't have to toivel it again. But there are people that felt that since I'm changing the purpose for this keli, I'll be machmer and I'll take it to the mikveh again. Says the Mishnah, beautiful din. First of all, very nice, good for you. The takonas chachamim not to take a keli to the mikveh on Yom Tov is only when the keli was tamei, and you need to take it to the mikveh to be allowed to use it b'tahara. That type of tefillah is asur on Yom Tov. If you want to do a tefillah of a chumrah, which is really halachically not changing a status, that we allow for you to do. You're not violating a Rabbanan, because it wasn't necessary to begin with. Then,
what's the point of taking the mikveh if there is no need to begin with?
So I mentioned, Yakir, since Benegeya, other halachas of Tumah and Tara, limashal, like I gave, if a person is going to the mikveh because the kohen wants to make sure that he can eat truma betahara, and then he says, you know what, I want to use it for kachim. There, the halacha is he has to take it to the mikveh again. You can argue why he took it to the mikveh. It's the same mikveh. He was very mindful. Nothing touched it. It did not become tamei. Still, when it comes to the concept of toiveling for one's level, if you want to use it for something that he has a higher level, we don't allow you without going to the mikveh again. So this is a halacha. So therefore, people were machman on themselves to make sure they'll never forget that. They said that any time I toivel a keli for one purpose, if I want to change the purpose, I'm going to toivel it again. It's a chumrah that makes sense. It fits that. Okay, similarly, the last line in the Mishnah, when the Mishnah says you also are allowed to go to the mikveh, mechabura lachabura, from one group to the other, similar concept. If a person was going to be eating, Rashi says, with one group his Korban Pesach, and the person went to the mikvah to make sure that they're going to eat it b'tahara. But they always had in mind eating the Korban Pesach with one group. Now we know that before the Shechita you can change your mind. You can leave one group and join another. And that's what happened. Here again, by the letter of the law, you don't have to go to the mikvah again. But there were people that felt that whenever you make a change, when it comes to Tum and Tara, go to the mikvah again. Or the keli is going to be used with the other group, take the keli to the mikvah again. Here says the Mishnah, you are allowed to take it to the mikvah on Yom Tov proper, because since it's taka not needed, so therefore, there's a big chiddush with that, right? Let's go with the last, just to point out the novelty. The last approach in the Gemara on Daf Yud Ches in the bottom was Rava, that it's nira, right, kemesak and keli. You can argue it's still nira kemesak and keli. You see someone taking something to the mikvah. But the answer is no. No, that it's not mesak and keli because it was mesukan already. Okay. We're starting a sugya that's beautiful. Now it's mamish, we're going to go for a while into a whole sugya of, again, oichel nefesh, not private, which is permitted. That's the pasuk in Parshas Boy. Ach asher yei ochel l'chol nefesh hu levado yei osa lochem. Hutra l'tzoyrech oichel nefesh. Here we're going to apply the doing various malaches l'tzoyrech karbanos, which one can argue, well, if it's a karban, it's being given to Hashem, it's achilas mizbeach, oichel. We're going to see whether we apply that or not. Says the Mishnah. And now clearly there's a machlokes Beishamai and Beisilol, and then as we will learn the sugya, there's going to be a machlokes as to what's their machlokes. Beishamai yoimrim meviim shlamim, that only a shlamim can be brought. In other words, not a carbon oila. Guys, don't make one mistake over here. The oilas that are connected to Yom Tiv, as well as the Talmud, the morning Talmud, which is an oila. If you remember, we learned this in Yuma. Whenever the Torah uses the words bimoy adoi, this has to be brought in its appointed time. That for sure overrides Yom Tiv. It even overrides Shabbos. Where Shabbos, there's no heter l'tzoyrech oichel nefesh. You bring the Talmud on Shabbos and the Beis Hamikdash, or you bring the Karban Musaf. We're not speaking, at least let's begin, the Shlomim is not clear. Karbanis that are connected to Yom Tov are brought. Now what about Karbanis Tzibur that are connected to Yom Tov? What about a Karban Yachid that's connected to Yom Tov? So Beishamai says you can bring the Shlomim. Rashi says, because even though some of it is burnt on the Mizbeach, some of it is eaten by the owners. That's a Karban Shlamim. However, even those that could be brought, ve'ein soimchin aleim. You may not do the act of smicha. Smicha means leaning on the head of the animal with all of your might, with both of your hands. Why may you not do smicha? Here again, Rashi tells us, we have this gezeda of hishtamshus bebalachayim. One may not make use of animals, which is sitting, riding on animals, which even will mean to properly lean on the animals. All of that was a takana, that if you're going to ride an animal, you might rip off a branch to use it as a whip. So you may not do smicha. Abel says, Beishamai, loy oilos. Loy oilos, and here Garashi points out, oilos means aside of the communal oilos, tamidim, and musafim, that have a zman kavua, you may not bring. An oilas yachid, a private oila, even connected to Yom Tiv, and by the way, every Yom Tiv we needed to bring a oilas re'iyah and a shalmei chagiga, connected to Yom Tiv. So according to Beishamai, shalmei chagiga may be brought, because you're going to be eating from it. Oilas re'iyah, you're going to bring it on Chol HaMoed. You're going to bring it after the day of Yom Tiv, and by the way, you can bring it for a whole week, and that's even by Shavuos, you can bring it for a whole week, but you may not bring it on Yom Tiv proper. Why? Rashi, lefi she'ein bo achilas hedyet. Even though it's going to be consumed by the altar, and therefore, when the Torah says, hu levade ye'ase lochem, taiches beishamai, what is allowed to be done for food related? Lochem, not legavoya. Beis Hillel oimrim, they argue twice with Beis Shammai. Number one, not only can you bring a shlamim, you can also bring an oila. Now, is Beis Hillel saying that you can bring a shlamim that's only connected to Yom Tiv? Or is Beis Hillel saying that even a carbon that doesn't have a fixed time, a person made a vow to bring a shlamim, maybe even that may be brought on Yom Tiv? That will be a machloikas in Tanoim, what Beis Hillel holds. But you can bring a shlamim and an oila. And number two, when you bring a carbon that needs to have smicha, yes, v'soimchin aleim, you are allowed to do smicha. We override the general takana of not making use of balachayim. Actually, the very fact that this carbon overrides Yom Tiv, as we'll see in the Gemara, automatically means that smicha also will be allowed to be done. And a lot more about this machlekes as we will unpackage this Gemara. So let's begin with the shlamim and understanding better Shitas Beis Shammai. When Beis Shammai says you can bring a shlamim. So Amar Ula says, Ula, I want you to know that the machlekes regarding Beis Shammai Beis Hillel is only Bishalmei Chagiga Lismoich. Beis Shammai, who says you can bring a shlamim, Beis Shammai doesn't mean that you can bring a neder, a voluntary shlamim. No, even though people eat of it, it's not connected to the Yom Tiv. He's only allowing you to bring a shlamim that's connected to the Yom Tiv, right? So you can bring it, and nevertheless, Zok Beis Shammai, that Shalmei Chagiga may not have smicha. Now we're going to see in next daf, what does Beis Shammai mean? You b'chlal don't do smicha, or maybe he holds that you have to do smicha erev Yom Tiv, that could be. Even though you can say that normally the rule is takev, that right after you do smicha, you do shchita. Beis Shammai doesn't subscribe to that. We're going to see more about the when, if, later. And v'oila sre'iyah, the oila that's connected to Yom Tiv. That on that, Beis Shammai says you may not bring it on Yom Tiv. You're going to bring it on Chol HaMoed. On Shavuos, there's no Chol HaMoed. You're going to bring it the next day, during the Yemei Tashlumin. But you can't bring it on Yom Tiv. Why is that? Because the Beis Shammai Sovrei, then when it says v'chagoisim oisoi chag lashem, so the word lashem is hinting that even on Yom Tiv you can bring it. That's only the chagiga. Only the chagiga can be brought to God, and actually that tells us that the oilas re'iyah, even though it's related to Yom Tiv, cannot be brought. Beis Hillel says, Pum Faker, the word Lashem means anything that's connected La Hashem. Guys, Lashem here doesn't just mean to God. All the karbanos are being brought to Hashem. The Lashem means it's connected to the Yom Tiv. Any carbon connected to the Yom Tiv, including the obligation of every male to bring an oilas re'iyah, since you're bringing it Lashem, even though it's not eaten at all, is also allowed to be brought on Yom Tiv. The point of Ula is, Avol nedarim unedavos, both oilos and even shlamim, even though every carbon shlamim is eaten a little bit by the kahanim, it's eaten also by the owners. Divrei hakol ein kerevim b'yontiv. Very good. So says Ula. V'chein Omar Rav Ada bar Ahava, like Ula, that after we learned Shitas Beis Hillel, it sounds like, well, you can bring an oila, you can bring a shlamim. No, these are only karbanos related to Yom Tov. The karbanos yachid, which is why Beis Shammai holds that even the oila cannot be brought. Beis Shammai is moided that the tamid is brought, that the musaf is brought, but not karbanos yachid, even related to Yom Tov. Beis Hillel is lenient, but nedarim and nedavos. Now I made a vow, right? I made a pledge. I can bring it whenever. Not whenever, there's thou shall not delay. We'll see about that later, but you can bring it on Yom Tov. En kerevim b'Yom Tov, even according to Beis Hillel. Very nice. It says in Abraisa, Amar Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Here again, it's beautiful. Throughout this Masechta, we have Rab Shimon ben Elazar changing, or he brings a different version of what their machlokes is. Lo nechloku Beis Shammai uBeis Hillel. Concerning an oila she'ena shel Yom Tiv, which is an oila of a neder or an adava, here is where everyone agrees, even Beis Hillel, she'ena kereva b'Yom Tiv. Also, the al shlamim she'en shel Yom Tiv, everyone agrees that they are brought on Yom Tiv. And by the way, this doesn't only include the shalmei chagiga, which you have to bring. This even includes Shalmei Simcha. Shalmei Simcha means that I have a separate obligation to eat sacrificial meat on Yom Tov. So let's say I fulfilled my Shalmei Chagiga in the beginning of Yom Tov, but now it's Shvi'ah Shel Pesach. Now it's Shvi'ah Shel Pesach, it's still I have to have Shalmei Simcha. You can bring it according to everyone. Shekerevim b'Yom Tov. Al men nechleku, where do they argue? Al oila shehi shel Yom Tov. And now here you have the words. Va'al shlamim she'einam shel Yom Tov. A private neder on another shlamim. That they argue about this. That mamish goes against Ula. Shebeishamim oimrim takel lo yavi. And Beis Hillel oimrim, yes, yavi. Clearly Beis Hillel holds, according to the Rab Shimon ben Elazar, that a shlamim not Yom Tov related is brought on Yom Tov. It makes sense because it's oichel nefesh, because there's achilas hedyet. So because of this problem, the Gemara is saying, Tritz ve'emahachi. Tritz ve'emahachi means we are amending this Beitzah. That Amar Rab Shimon ben Elazar, loy nechloku beishamay Beis Hillel, a new version. He's making a new version for this not to contradict Ula. Al oila u shlamim both. Iftar she'enim shal Yom Tov, everyone is maida, exactly like Ula says, she'ein kerevim b'Yom Tov. Likewise, everyone agrees, al shlamim she'em shal Yom Tov, she'kerevim b'Yom Tov. Al menechloku al oila she'i shal Yom Tov. She'beishamay emrim lo yavi, u Beis Hillel yavi. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yosef Amar, when you only have one version of a Tana, and Ula obviously said otherwise, and on the presumption that Ula knew all of the works of the Tanoim, for Ula not to be contradicted, you have to amend the Beitzah. But Rabbi Yosef says, we know that there are other Tanoim, there are other Beitzahs that clearly back up Ula. So therefore, why do I have to amend this Beitzah? Why don't we say, which we do, that there is a machloikes Tanoim, what Beis Hillel holds, and Ula has the right to pick the side of one Tana. And like this, you don't have to amend a Beitzah. In other words, Amar Rabbi Yosef, 3 lines from the bottom, Tanoi shakalt ma'alma. You're taking away other works of Tanoim. Don't you know there are other Beitzahs? Don't you know that we have a Beitzah that says exactly what Ula said later? So it doesn't bother me to leave the girsa of this Beitzah of Rab Shimon ben Elazar. Ula goes like the other one. That Tanoi, the Tanya, Shlamim haboy machmas Yom Tov, second to last line, be Yom Tov. Here is where Beis Shammai says Soymech Aleim Erev Yom Tov. Here we have another detail. It's Beis Shammai and our Mishnah says don't do smicha. Here it's very clear. It's not don't do smicha. Don't do smicha on Yom Tov. Do smicha Erev Yom Tov. V'shoichtan beYom Tov. Beis Hillel oimrim Soymech Aleim beYom Tov. V'shoichtan beYom Tov. But this is regarding shlamim that is connected to Yom Tov, which is, let's go Shalmei Chagiga Daf Yutes Amid Beis. Avol clear. Nedarim unedavais divrei hakol ein kerevim b'Yom Tov. So Ula clearly is saying what this Beitzah says. So Rav Yosef is saying, he lost his vision. They had the amazing memories. Maybe he connected somehow. He says, no, leave the Beitzah the way it is. I have this one. Ula will go like this one. So in other words, there is a machloikes Tanoim. What is Shitas Beis Hillel? There's a machloikes Tanoim, exactly where are they arguing, and indeed, v'hane Tanoi, kahane Tanoi. No, this is the question, guys. The question is, can a person bring on Yom Tov, not on Chol Hamoed, on Yom Tov personal oilos and shlamim? So oilos for sure not. Can you bring a shlamim? Does Beis Hillel allow you to do that? A machloikes Tanoim, and here the Tanya, another Beitzah. Now, this Beitzah doesn't explicitly word it the way we just worded it, but there's going to be a beautiful machloikas regarding a carbon toida. There's going to be the initial way of understanding it, and then ultimately the correct way of understanding it. But as we will see, one of the premises of this Beitzah will be this question: can you bring a carbon shlamim on Yom Tov? Now, a toida, just to make it clear, is a shlamim. It's not mamish like a shlamim. It doesn't abide by all the rules of a shlamim. For example, a carbon shlamim can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. A carbon doida can only be eaten for 1 day and 1 night. Parenthetically, the reason why today we make a sudas hoida'a is because since when a carbon doida was brought, A Korban Toida has to be eaten with 40 loaves of bread. It comes with a lot of bread. Now there were different types. The 40 loaves of breads were divided into 4 different types. 10. One group of 10 was chametz, mamash chametz. Now, since a Korban Toida has to be eaten one day and one night, that means you had a relatively small window to consume it, not to, God forbid, allow anything to be left over. Isur Noisar, you were forced to invite many people to join you. And that's the source of having a Sudas Hoidah and inviting a lot of people with at least a Rabbanan to join the meal as well. Okay, but now let's go like this. Hanatanoi kahanatanoy, the Tanya. Ein meviim toida b'chag hamatzos. On Pesach, you can bring a Korban Toida. Korban Toida has in it, like we mentioned, 10 of the 40 loaves are chametz. You can't have chametz on Pesach. Today, that the Mizmar L'Soida Unashalma Padim Sifosenu is connected to the Korban Toida. As we know, we don't say Mizmar L'Soida during Pesach. We actually don't even say Mizmar L'Soida on Erev Pesach, as we'll see soon the Pshat in this B'rais. Okay, so number one is you can't bring a Torah on Pesach. Why? Mipnei chametz sheba. Likewise, this is the Tanach Shita. V'loi ba'atzeres. You may not bring a Korban Toida on Shavuos. Mipnei shahu yamtiv. Clear. In other words, what does the Tanach hold? A Korban Toida is in the category of a neder and a dava. Now I know that you bring it arba'a. Tzrichem lahoidos v'chol hachayim, achoyla, yam, yisurim, midbar. We know that, but it's not related to any specific time frame. That's pshat nadarim and nadavos. And if you would not pledge to bring the toida, you wouldn't bring it. You should have, but you have to pledge to bring it. So the fact that this Tana holds that it cannot be brought on Atzeres, in other words, when the Tana says you can't bring it on Pesach, it means not even on Chol HaMoed. Of course, there's chametz. You can't bring it on Atzeres. Now we paskin like Pesilo. Yet this Tana says that a neder and a dava is not brought on Yom Tov, even though the toid is eaten. Clearly, this will be right like the shita of Ula that says that even lebesilo divrei hakol ein kerevim b'Yom Tov. Avo, but let's keep on focusing on the Torah. Avo mevi adam toidase b'chag hasukos. Now, guys, obviously, what does it mean b'chag hasukos? The initial understanding on Chol HaMoed. You can bring it on Chol HaMoed. Now, Rab Shimon Oimer, no. We'll see soon what he says. No, but he's saying no. Harehu Oimer, he's quoting a pasuk in Parshas Re'eh that juxtaposes all of the 3 Yomim Tovim together. It says, B'chag HaMatzos, B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos. The fact that we put them all 3 together teaches us, Kol Sheba B'chag HaMatzos, a korban that could be brought on Pesach, that, yes, B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos. However, V'chol Sheba B'chag HaMatzos, Eineba B'chag HaShavuos, B'chag HaSukkos. What exactly does Reb Shimon mean? The Gemara will elaborate soon. The way we're learning, it sounds like he's saying you can't even bring it on Chag HaSukkos, but again, we'll get back to that soon. And the third opinion in this B'raisa, because what we are focusing on right now is to show that there is a machloikes tanoim, whether a shalmei neder unadava is allowed to be brought on Yom Tov or not. We're using this B'raisa to point out from the Tanakama that says you may not bring it on Shavuos with our current understanding, because Toida is a neder unadava, may not be brought on Yom Tov. So which Tana argues with that? Rab Lazar ben Rab Shimon Oimer, maybe Adam Teidasi b'chag HaSukkos. Number one. Number two, not only can you bring it on Sukkos, now does he mean on Yom Tov, does he mean on Chol HaMoed? Let's go even the way we're learning on Chol HaMoed. A very important din, and that is, like we mentioned in the introduction, that on every Yom Tov I'm obligated to come with an oilas re'iyah and with what we call with a shalmei chagiga, I'm obligated to bring a shalmei chagiga. I have to bring a korban. There is another mitzvah. I have to be the samachta b'chagecha. And the ultimate way of realizing samachta b'chagecha is by me eating meat of kachim. but I don't have to bring a korban for the Shalmei Simcha. If there is already meat from kachim, and I eat it, I'm fulfilling the mitzvah. So therefore, says a second statement of Rab Shimon, that if I have to bring, for me to realize my simcha, I can use my korban toida. Even though it's not brought because of Yom Tov, I anyways would have to bring it. So what? I have a shlamim, here a toida, I'm eating it on Yom Tov, I have yoytze and my simcha. But the ein yoytze ba mishum chagiga, but for me to double dip, there's a rule, like we mentioned, that what? That kol davar shebechayva ein ba elam achulin. If God is obligating me to bring a korban, I have to use what would otherwise be chulin. I can't take something that anyways I'm mechuyev to bring and double dip. That we don't allow. Now, where do we see from Rab Elazar ben Rab Shimon that he argues with the Tanakama and he holds that you could bring a neder and a dava? Now we're going to break down this Beitzah and we're going to show that indeed this is also part of the Machlokes Tanoim. So let's go. Amar Mar, recording now Rab Shimon. Ein meviim toida b'chag hamatzos. No, I'm sorry, recording the Tanakama. Why? B'pnei chamet sheba. Says the Gemara Pshita. Of course. Why would you even think you can bring it? Amar Avada b'reid Rabbi Yitzchak. Or the Amrillah, that the answer was given in the name of Rab Shmuel bar Abba. I'll tell you what the Beitzah is really saying. Of course you can't have a toida, you can't bring a toida on Pesach. It means, the Beitzah, the Tanakama is saying you may not even bring a toida on Erev Pesach. Why? I'll tell you why. When you bring a korban toida, like we mentioned, how much time do you have to eat up all of that which is edible? One day and one night. The day that you bring it and that night. We learned in Pesachim, even only midoiraisa. Already from midday, Erev Pesach, there's an isur doiraisa to eat chametz. You're not going to be chayv karas until the night, but you're not allowed to eat it. So a person might think, you know what? Let me chaparain. Let me bring my korban toida before chatzos, and you know what? I'll invite the ganze Welt, and I'll eat up everything in 5 minutes. You're not allowed to do that. Why can you not do that? Because if not for today being Erev Pesach, you would have a day and a night to finish eating up all that which you have to eat. By you bringing it on Erev Pesach, you are limiting the time of consuming it. And if taka, you won't eat it until midday, you won't be allowed to eat it. And therefore it will become disqualified. So we subscribe, v'kosaver ein meviim kachim lebeis absul. You may not eat kachim or bring kachim at a time that because of your chosen time, you are upping the chances of it becoming disqualified. You are limiting the time that it could be eaten. So therefore, you can't eat it even if you're confident that you'll finish it before the Zman Isser. Okay, so that's number one. So that's one clarification. Let's interpret the Tanakama. Then the Tanakama says, V'loi bat seres. This we read correct. Why can't you bring it on the Yom Tov of Shavuos? Because taka mipnei shehu Yom Tov. And the Kosovar, this Tana holds that Nedarim and Nedavos ain't kedevim b'Yom Tov. And guys, don't forget, Beishamai or Beisilol, Beishamai ain't a Mishnah even. That means that even Beisilol holds like that, like Ula. Then when the Beitzah continues the Tanakama, that ein avol maybe adam to das b'Chag. What exactly does that mean, Amos? It can't mean that the Tanakama is saying that you can bring a korban toida during the Yom Tov Atzmai. Of course not, because for ha'amrat v'loi ba'atzeres b'pnei shehu Yom Tov. Ella, what must it mean? It must mean that you could bring it b'choyloi shalmoyet. Oh, now we got a problem. Because if the Tanakama is speaking only about Chol HaMoyed, which means that later when Rab Shimon says, Harei yoim b'chag hamatzos u'b'chag hashvuos b'chag hasukos, kol shuba b'chag hamatzos b'chag hashvuos b'chag hasukos, v'chol shuba b'chag hamatzos b'chag hasukos. L'choyre, that pshat would then mean is that Rab Shimon is saying that you can't even have it. You may not even bring it on Chol HaMoyed Sukkos. That's the pshat of what he's saying. So Maskav Lo Rab Zera, that doesn't make sense. It can be that there is a Tana that holds that a korban toida cannot be brought on Chol HaMoyed Sukkos. Doesn't make sense. Why not? He uses this analogy. Hashta saloisei misaltinon, as we will learn in Masechtas Moyed Katan, that a person on Chol HaMoyed is even allowed to gather wood that's connected to the ground and uproot it, to gather wood for Yom Tov. No, it's mamish a violation of something which normally will be called a malacha. That is allowed on Chol HaMoed. Are you telling me that you can't bring a korban in the Beis HaMikdash on Chol HaMoed? Doesn't make sense. And therefore, says the Gemara, of course you can bring a korban on Chol HaMoed, but the problem is the flow doesn't go. Because if the Tanakama was speaking about Chol HaMoed, so then he's outlawing it on Chol HaMoed. So Amar Abaye, let me clarify what they are arguing. Be'hakrava, as far as bringing the korban toida kula amaloi pligi, that of course you can bring it on Chol HaMoed Sukkos. Ki pligi, there's another whole machlokes going on in this Beitzah, and that is lemekam Allah bebalta achar. Exactly when will one be in violation of the pasuk that we have in Parshas Ki Seitze regarding the bringing of karbanos? Thou shalt not delay it. Now here it's kedai. We're going to have the sugya on Rosh Hashanah Daf Daled and Beis. Keep your finger in the Gemara. And I want to read the Rashi. There's time and to read out the Rashi. The Rashi is more or less on the same height, maybe 1 or 2 lines lower. Says Rashi, v'kula hach masnison le'inyan bal ta'achar ayre. Rashi says like this. Tanakama holds like this. Kol hama'achar nidre sholosh regalim. If you delay by not bringing your vows over 3 yomim tovim, 3 regalim, afilu shaloi kesidran, I don't care if it didn't go Pesach Shavuos Sukkos. I don't care the order, you're going to violate bal ta'achar. And the reason of that is, as we learn in Masechtas Rosh Hashanah, Mahaikra, where the Torah says Shalish Pa'amim Bashana, and then the Torah adds Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos. So the Gemara asks over there, Lamali lemichtav Chag HaMatzos, u'b'Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, Kiven Nechsiv Shalish Pa'amim. And from the context, we already read about all of the 3 Yomim Tovim. So Pshita Dahanininu, because Taha Minayu Kasalik. The Liel Minei, it already speaks about Shomanas Chodesh Aviv. Before it says Shiva Shavuos Tisperlach, before we mention Chag HaSukkos, Shma Mina, that this repetition of these words, Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShavuos, Chag HaSukkos, is Labal Ta'achad Loimer, Eile Kovati Loch Letashlim Matnisecha Unidorecha, that you have, in other words, thou shalt not delay. Guys, we're not saying that you can only bring a korban during Yom Tov. No, bring a korban, the sooner the better. But when do you violate Bal Ta'achar? When 3 Yomim Tovim passed. Now, since the Tanakama holds that it doesn't matter the order of how it passed, it doesn't matter when you made the vow, right? If you make the vow right now, right? Today we're between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. The first Yom Tov is Sukkos. So according to him, when are you going to violate? Sukkos, Pesach, Shavuos. Ooh, if Shavuos passes, boom, you violated Bal Ta'achar. Doesn't have to go on the Seder. So now, v'hainu de ka'aseh lashmu'inan eitza toiva, that call me sheyesh olav toida. You made a vow now, before Sukkos, bring it on Sukkos. Makes a lot of sense. Why should you bring it on Sukkos? You can just say it by heart. Because since the Tanakama says, and everyone is Maida, on Pesach you're not allowed to bring it. On Shavuos, the Tanakama subscribes to the rule that you may not bring the Dadim and the Davis on Yom Tov. So if you can't bring it on Pesach and you can't bring it on Shavuos, when is the only opportunity for you to bring it? Now on Sukkos. That is what he's saying. Tanakama is saying, bring it now. If you will not bring it now, you will violate Bal Ta'achar. I want to add something. I'm not going to violate Bal Ta'achar because I don't have to bring it over Yom Tov. It's a Eitza Toiva. Eitza Toiva means that most people that lived then in Eretz Yisrael, they didn't stam go to Yerushalayim. They went there 3 times a year. So if they won't bring it on Sukkot, they will have to make a special trip not to violate Bal Ta'achar, because just going Pesach and just going Shavuos won't help them. Because you can't bring a Toida on Pesach, you can't even bring it out of Pesach, you can't bring it on Shavuos. That's what the Tanakama is saying. Now we'll read it inside the Gemara, and now we'll understand why Rab Shimon argues. Let's read it inside the Gemara. Yes.
Quick question here.
Yes.
Why can't we just say the korban taida can be eaten on sukkahs as oichel nefesh?
So that's this whole topic, Tzvika. In other words, oichel nefesh that's not kachim related for sure could be made on Yom Tov. Question is, if you have a korban, how do you view a korban? That's the sole sugya. So I have a shlamim, not related to Yom Tov, like a korban taida. Or stama adon, I committed to bring a korban shlamim. Do you say, some of it is going to be eaten by me, we view the whole korban as oichel nefesh, you can bring it? Or do we say, no, that hu levade yeyase lochem, we'll see more in tomorrow's next daf, that the heter oichel nefesh is something that's exclusively chulin. If it's kachim, then it's not included in the heter for oichel nefesh, but if it's Yom Tov related, if it's bimoyadoi, that's something else that you can bring even on Shabbos.
Even though he's eating part of that carbon?
Yes. Clear. Now that's this whole topic, Tzvika. We are learning now the Shita, which is the Tanakama, like Ula, that even Beis Hillel holds that you cannot bring a neder and a dava of shlamim on Yom Tov. But there's another Shita, Bishitas Beis Hillel, that a shlamim could always be brought on Yom Tov, exactly like you're saying, Tzvika, because it's oichel nefesh. That's the machloikas tanoim Bishitas Beis Hillel. But let's come back over here. Tanakama holds regarding Balta Achar that Sholish Regalim Amar Achmana Afilo Shleika Sidron, and therefore, if you don't want to make an extra trip to Yerushalayim, Eitza Toiva, even though you only made your vow before Sukkot, whenever it was before, bring it on Sukkot, because you're not going to have an opportunity on the other two Yomim Tovim, and if you won't bring it, you'll violate Balta Achar. Rab Shimon holds that Kesidron in Shaloi Kesidron Loi. The fact that the Torah orders it, Chag HaMatzos, Chag HaShvuos, Chag HaSukkos, you know what that means? Let's go right now. If we make a vow right now to bring a shlamim, Torah or any other shlamim, if we don't bring it on Sukkos, it's not even one Yom Tov yet. You only begin counting down the three Yomim Tovim by placing Pesach, Chag HaMatzos, the first of the three. So if you don't bring it this year, Chag HaSukkos, when will you violate Balta Achar? Only next year, Chag HaSukkos. So you don't have that pressure. You don't have to bring it right now. Eitz Tov. If not, you're going to violate Balta Achar unless you'll make another trip. Now, what are we getting at? If that is the pshat, now let's go into the third Tana. Rab Loza Rab Shimon Omer, Mevi Adam Toidase B'Chag HaSukkos. When he said those words, what does he now mean? That can't be that statement, because that statement would be nothing new. He's not adding anything. That will be mamish like the Tanakama. Rab Shimon is adding to the Tanakama. Ella b'Yom Tov. What he means to say is that you can bring it on Yom Tov. In other words, Rab Shimon holds nedarim unadavis kerevim b'Yom Tov, which must mean that they argue what Beis Hillel holds. We follow Beis Hillel. So again, just a Hana Tanoi, there's a Machloikas Tanoi, what a Shitas Beis Hillel. Now, if the point of Rab Loza ben Rab Shimon arguing with the Tanakama is simply to say that you can bring it on Yom Tov, like for example, why didn't he mention Atzeres? Atzeres was the Yom Tov that the Tanakama mentioned. You don't bring it on Atzeres because it's Yom Tov. So he should have said, bring it on Atzeres. Umayshna Chag HaSukkos is the Nakat. I mean, he should argue on the same Yom Tov of the Tanakama. Answers the Gemara, there's another reason. Rab Shimon l'taimei, Rab Loza Rab Shimon l'taimei, the Tanya, Rab Shimon oimer, like we just learned, that when it comes to the lav of Balta Achar, it has to be Kesidron. Where did he get that from? Because in Parshas Re'ei, lo yoimer Chag HaSukkos, the Torah first speaks about Chag HaMatzos, then the Torah speaks about Chag HaShvuos, then the Torah speaks about Chag HaSukkos, then the Torah says Shalish Pa'amim. The one that's the most superfluous is Chag HaSukkos, Shiboi HaKosuv Medaber. So why did the Torah have to mention Chag HaSukkos? Even if the Torah would have mentioned Pesach and Shavuos, we would have understood that the third one is Sukkos. That's mamish the parsha of Sukkos. Loimar shezeh achrein. That's the source of Rab Shimon that holds that you're only over Balta Achar if the three Yomim Tovim pass by you Kisidron. Rab Loza ben Rab Shimon Omer. The reason why the Torah adds Chag HaSukkos, he holds. Now this is another shita. Shezeh goyrem. If you make a vow before Sukkos, my friends, you don't have three Yomim Tovim. It's not about three Yomim Tovim. It's that whenever Sukkot passes, boom, you are over on Balta Achar. Even if you made your vow right before Sukkot, if Chag HaSukkos passes, you are going to be violating Balta Achar. So the reason why Rab Loza ben Rab Shimon opines, really what he's innovating over here, the ikar here is to say that you could bring it on Yom Tov. The reason why he chooses Sukkos is because everyone would bring all of their Nadarim and Nadavos over Sukkos always, no matter when they made the vow, because if they won't bring it on Sukkot, they're going to be violating Baal Ta'achar. But what's the bottom line? Clearly, there's a machlokes between the Tanakama and Ablaza ben Rab Shimon, whether Nedarim and Nedavos are Kerevim b'Yom Tov or not. Now, the Mishnah says, Beis Hillel says, you bring them on Yom Tov. Yeah, the Mishnah is speaking about Shlamim and even oilos that are connected to Yom Tov. We're speaking about Nedarim and Nedavos. So again, that's just to make it clear that this is our machlokes tanoim. And now, let's continue to break down and to understand the Beitzah. When the Beitzah says that v'yoytze ba mishum simcha, that if you bring a korban toida, since you're going to be eating sar kachim, that's the mitzvah of being misameach by eating sacrificial meat. But ve'ena yoytze ba mishum chagiga, because you have a choivas gavra, you have to bring a side of the oilas re'iyah, a shalmei chagiga, you can't double dip. Says the Gemara Pshita, 3 lines from the first white line, Davar Shabachayvahu, bringing a Shalmei Chagiga is an obligation, and we know V'chol Davar Shabachayva Eina Ba Ela Min Achulin. Okay, and not your previously pledged toida. So the Gemara says, like, the Chiddush will be Afal Gav the Parish. Parish means when you made a stipulation. The way we're going to learn our Gemara, like Rashi learns, like Tosfos learns, that really, if a person pledges to bring a korban toida, and this person knows how to word things, and he makes the right seder in the pledge, you will be allowed to bring one korban, both to fulfill your obligation of shalmei chagiga and your obligation of a toida. This is a person that made a pledge. He pledged it in the wrong seder, and that's the chiddush, that since he didn't know how to word it properly, it's only going to be for his toida, and it won't be for his obligation of a chagiga. And this is actually like Kidaboi Minei Rab Shimon ben Lakish, like Reish Lakish asked of his esteemed brother-in-law of Rabbi Yechanan, that if a person says Harei Olai Toida, Harei Olai Toida. Now here's the key. The key is that when it comes to kachim amirosoi Ligavoya Kimesira Lahedyet. In other words, when you make a statement regarding kachim, the statement is like the kinyan. Your statement finalizes the deal. So if you mention first Harei Olai Toida, and then even Toich Kedei Dibur, you add your stipulation, Ve'eitzei ba Yedei Chagiga, not I'm bringing this for my chagiga, and I also want this to go for my toida. No. If you said Harei Olai Toida ve'eitzei chagiga, similarly, if a person first says Hareini Nazir, it's amazing that your commitment of being a Nazir already includes the commitment to bring the 3 karbanos chatos oila asham at the end of your Yemei Nazirus. So Harei Olai Nazir, as far as kachim is concerned, means that I'm already mechayev myself to bring karbanos. And now I add va'agalach mimois meiser sheni when I cut my hair, which is shem hamushal for bringing karbanos. I want to use meiser sheni money for my karbanos. Here again, there's a rule that you may not use, but you have a choif to bring karbanos at the end of your nazirus. Meiser sheni money is not called chulin. You may not use it for it. But, interestingly, if a person says, I am going to use meiser sheni mois for my commitment of Nazirus, then you will be allowed to do it. Because you lechatchila are stipulating that you're only becoming a Nazir because you are allowed to bring mois meiser sheni. The problem here is the seder of your Tanai. First you said Hareini Nazir. And even though Toich Kedei Dibur, you clarified what you meant, there is no such a thing as Toich Kedei Dibur by Kachim over here. And Hareini Nazir is Kachim? Yes, because Hareini Nazir already includes the commitment to bring the karbanos. So he asked his brother-in-law Mahu, and Amar Lei Rabbi Yechanan responded that Nador, the commitment is a commitment, but ve'ena yoytze, Nazir ve'ena megaleach. Look inside Rashi, 3 lines from the top of the Amid. Nazir ve'enim memois meiser element achulin, because the kiv and the Amar 4 lines on top in Rashi Harei Olai, when you said those words nischayev, why were you right away obligated? Because the amira ligavoya k'mesira lahedyet, and therefore v'chi hader oimer al menas lav milseim. Or like look inside the top Tosfos, Nazir ve'eda megaleach. According to Rashi and according to Tosfos, it's about the way you were mesader your commitment for dafka dika amar hachi. It's only because he ordered it the way the Gemara writes it. Avalam amar ibcha, but if this person would have said the opposite, if he would have said al menas she'etze mishum chagiga, on the condition that I will be allowed to use it also for my chagiga, harei olai toida. Then loy means he will be allowed to double dip. Or if a person, when it comes to a nazir, says, like we said, that al manas, that I can bring my karbanos of giluach from my sheni, harei olai nazir. And he's going to prove it from the story that we're going to continue, God willing, in the next year. Beautiful. But since he ordered it first by making a commitment of the carbon, and that's final with the word, now that he wants to add a stipulation, now it's too late. Now you are already committed. Bottom line is, at least we conclude with the sugya to have it clear. So we began a machlokes Beishamai and Beisilol. Very little was learned concerning smicha, even though we had on Daf Yutes in the bottom of the Amid that even leBeishamai, smicha has to be done before Yom Tov, but a lot more will be, God willing, in next Daf. But the nekuda will be is, how far is Hillel lenient? Does Hillel allow for you to bring a shalmei neder or nedava? Or, like Ula, no, even Beis Hillel holds that even though that you have over here meat that you will eat, there's achilas hedyet, it's from a carbon. A carbon that's not related to Yom Tov may not be offered on Yom Tov proper, and a lot more, God willing, to be continued.